Hi, and welcome to Japan This Week. A quick recap of some of the stories we've been following on the Japan Today news site for the week ending July 26, 2024. I'm Jeff Richards.
And I'm Kamasami Kong. And Jeff, what are some of the top stories that we're following this week?
Well, businesses here want to try a system where tourists pay more than locals. Prime Minister Kishida weighs in on the U.S. presidential race. A not-so-smooth operator has a sticky way of trying to meet girls, a lawsuit over some late pizza in Osaka, and finally, the captain of a Japan women's team leaves the Paris Olympics over what some say are innocent charges.
All right, let's get to some of the stories.
We start this week with a very controversial story that got more than 220 comments on Japan Today in our national news section.
Actually, Jeff, we received more comments on this story than on any other story on the Japan Today website.
Yes, it did. It was very divisive. Let's just put it that way. A growing number of restaurant and attraction operators are looking at charging foreign visitors to Japan more than residents.
And so the question arises, is this fair, and what's behind this move?
Well, they claim the dual price system is not meant to rip off visitors, but done out of urgent necessity. This is what they say. They cite rising labor and other costs as tourist numbers swell.
For example,
since its opening in April in Tokyo's Shibuya district, restaurant Tamate Bako has charged foreign tourists about 7,500 yen, roughly $50 for a seafood buffet weekday dinner.
However,
Japanese people and foreigners living in Japan can have the same meal for 1,100 yen less, about $40.
So we're talking about dual pricing here, right?
Yes, that's what we brought up. Restaurant owner Shogo Yonemitsu said he had to hike wages to hire English-speaking staff. He said it takes more time to attend to foreign customers. Other operators of popular tourist spots in Japan are also considering an increase in foreign tourist entry fees. The influx of tourists pushes up maintenance and refurbishment costs.
He has a good point there.
Well, he does. On the flip side, Tomoya Umekawa, who's a university professor at Kokugakuen University and specializes in tourism policy, said, and I'm quoting him here,
Okay.
Operators, if they need to raise prices due to the higher costs in attending to foreigners, should promote services in a way that would convince travelers it is worth the price. I would add, personally, that operators need to convince people that extra price is worth it, and that should apply across the board. And what about the foreign residents of Japan? Will they have to show proof of residence? This is a tourism minefield, and understandably, this policy got very little support from Japan Today readers, right, Colin?
Yes, indeed. Absolutely, Jeff. And here are a few examples of the many comments we received from our very astute and opinionated readers, and we love those opinions. A reader who goes by the name of Furby said, "A first world country with dual pricing. How embarrassing."
Yeah, I mean, what can I say to a comment like that? I know that in Thailand and, other places in Southeast Asia and in Europe as well, they have different pricing systems. But
Okay, let's move on. Another commenter by the name of Buffalo, cheats looking to cash in on the unsuspecting.
yes, I imagine that is the feeling that a lot of people have. That's the feeling that I had when I read the story first.
Moving on, Sakura Suki, that's the commenter's name, asks, will foreigners who are Japanese residents be subject to expensive pricing too, just because they are foreigners?
I think Sakura Suki has a point, but this person should probably read the story a little more because they do say that Japanese and people living here pay about 1,100 yen less. So to answer her question, will foreigners who are Japanese residents be subject to expensive pricing too? No, they will not.
Okay, moving on. One of the things I love about our commenters, Jeff, is that they have such a great sense of humor. And Big P demonstrates that by saying, I'll have to make a new T-shirt with, and I quote, I live, work, and pay my taxes in Japan. Please don't charge me extra.
Yeah, I've often thought of English teachers in Japan. They should have a T-shirt that says it costs 10 yen to talk to me. But the person has a point. I think, though, that they'll find that they're spending more money on making the T-shirt than they are from the overcharge in the restaurant.
All right, moving on. Nomad had a great comment and just gets right to the point. Nomad says, utter BS. Where does this end once it starts? First restaurants, then temples, taxis, supermarkets, clothing stores. It'll be a mess.
Well, I don't necessarily agree with the Nomad. He or she is putting quite a bit of projection in there. Where does this end? Taxis, supermarkets, clothing stores, my mobile phone bill? I think it's a little crazy. It's pushing the bounds of reality for me.
Let's move on. We have a story about two foreigners in the world of politics coming up next, right?
Yes, we do. How could we avoid this one, Kong? Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida says he respects U.S. President Joe Biden's decision to drop out of the 2024 presidential election, stressing that the two countries' alliance remains vital.
I agree. And what did he have to say about VP and candidate Kamala Harris?
Well, referring to Vice President Harris becoming the likely Democratic Party nominee for the November 5th election, Kishida said, needless to say, the Japan-U.S. alliance is a linchpin of our nation's diplomatic security policies. I don't think that answers your question. Well, Japan has already hedged its bet on the outcome of the election by sending former Prime Minister Taro Aso to meet with former President and Republican nominee Donald Trump earlier this year. Following Biden's decision to drop out, it's going to be a hotly contested race. You need to reach out to both sides of the aisle, I think. I think all leaders of all countries are going to try to somehow reach out to both sides. They kind of have to prepare for what's going to come, right?
Yeah, and who knows? Things are changing so fast in this political arena.
Yeah, they are. And I'm very sure that Japan Today readers had some strong opinions about this. What do you think, Kong?
Well, it's not so much what I think, it's what our readers thought, our commenters thought. Well, a reader who goes by the name of Peter 14 has a very well thought out comment. Peter 14 says, while Kishida is understanding of Biden's position, he, like many other world leaders and U.S. allies, does not want a return of Trump. Kishida knows that any alternative to Trump is the better option for Japan. Kishida should call VP Harris at his earliest opportunity to wish her well.
Well, I think that would be, it seems like a recurring theme here in the story, but that would be the diplomatic thing to do, would it not?
It would. It's kind of like place your bets, folks.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would imagine that Vegas already has odds on it.
Okay, let's move along. And speaking of moving along, the next commenter's name is Along for the Ride. Kishida will respect any international decision as long as it benefits him. He should also be standing down. I guess he means because of age.
Well, yes. I mean, we've spoken a lot, you and I, about politics, both in America and Japan. But let's just say for the record that the Japanese political leaders are, by and large, older men. And probably a lot of them could step down to get some young energy into this country. I think that would be great.
Do you think that would ever happen?
I can't say because I'm not allowed to vote. At the moment, I don't see it happening. And it's going to be very slow, as is everything in Japan, right?
Okay. You know, Jeff, at the end of this podcast, we often say we report on all the most interesting and most unusual stories.
Yeah.
And this next story that we're going to be talking about is, well, to say the least, unusual because it involves bird poop.
Well, our next story is in the crime section, and it's tangentially related to bird poop. Yes. How do I segue into this? I'm just gonna get into it.
Okay.
Dating can be hard, no matter what country you're in. Particularly if you're the person making the first move. One 25-year-old man in Nagoya came up with a idiotic way to try and pick up women.
Okay, tell us, what did he do?
He approached a woman in her 30s on the street and asked her for directions. Seems a nice way to start out.
Very innocent.
While she assisted him, he squirted some liquid glue into her hair. He alerted her to it, saying that it looked like a bird had pooped on her.
Well, Elmer's glue kind of looks like bird poop.
Perhaps. They don't mention the brand.
Pigeon poop.
The woman did not take too kindly to being sprayed with this substance, stuff,
Of course.
and call police.
Why not?
Here's the kicker. The man admitted to doing this to women about 10 times since March for the purpose of getting an opportunity to pick them up.
I wonder how they extracted this information from this guy.
Well, he is now awaiting trial on assault charges, so I imagine when you are in lockup for a little while, you'll confess to anything.
So, Jeff, if he did this 10 times, I have to wonder what his success rate might have been. And I wonder if his method will inspire copycats.
I think his success rate was absolutely zero, because it sounds like a really shoddy, not well thought out, and rude way to meet people of the opposite sex or the same sex, whatever way you want to go. But zero. If he was successful on the first try, I would imagine that he would still be with that person.
Well, sounds like a sticky situation. And of course, our commenters had many interesting comments. False Flag Steve said, "That boy ain't right. Needs some psychiatric help pronto. If he thinks this is a good idea to get a bird," a girl, I guess he means, "then definitely he has a screw loose. Or maybe he should get a bird, an actual bird, to do the pooping."
Or a puppy or a dog. False Flag Steve is obviously British, using the term bird. This whole story reminds me of that old joke. It's an old English joke. Two friends are talking, and one says, "Hey, mate, what would you do if a bird shit on your head?" And the mate says, "Well, I wouldn't go out with her again."
Okay, Faito, frequent commenter on the Japan Today website, calls it as it is when he says, "Absolute sick creep."
Yeah, I do think it's creepy. I don't think, to be honest, as I think about this, I don't think he was doing this to meet girls. I think he was just doing this for the opportunity to squirt stuff in girls' hair. Oh, did I step over the line there?
That's okay. Yeah, but actually, that's part of the next comment from Kohaku Ebisu, who had the astute observation in writing, "Squirting stuff onto a person is a classic trick used by pickpocketing teams to distract people in countries with pickpockets."
Well, yes, anything that needs some kind of distraction, but I don't think this guy was practicing to become part of a pickpocket team.
So, Jeff, if you're on the street and you see a crime like this or some action like this happening, would you encourage readers to try to capture it on an iPhone?
Oh, gosh, no. No, I would not.
No?
I mean, there's been a string of stories in Japan right now of teams of people going out to try to capture other people doing voyeuristic filming, like up girls' skirts on escalators and stuff, and then bribing them by saying, "Hey, we'll go to the police, but if you don't want us to go to the police, pay us $5,000, and we won't do that."
Oh.
So I would encourage people to not film.
Well, what if you saw this crime, this so-called crime in action? What would you encourage someone to do?
Personally, I would encourage them to walk up and say, "What's going on here?" But they could innocently go up and say, "Hey, I saw you squirted something in that girl's hair. Is she okay?"
You know what, Jeff? We have a place on the Japan Today website in our comment area for this podcast where you, our listeners, can weigh in on this. If you saw this happening on the street, what would you do? We'd love to read your comment.
Yes, definitely. This will go up Friday at 6 o'clock. So, yeah, what would you do in this situation? I'm sure there are privacy concerns and all sorts, but it would be interesting to hear what listeners have to say.
And our next commenter, who goes by the name of Captain Dingelheimer, has perhaps the most poignant question when he asks, how many times did this get him laid?
Again, I'm going to go back to my default answer of 0.
But Shogun 36's comment sums it up nicely. Shogun 36 says, that's enough internet for today.
True enough, but I think that'll lead into the next story, wouldn't it?
Another unusual, another one of those unusual stories. But here in Japan, it's a story that shows up in the news all the time, and it has to do with pizza. We have a pizza story in the news. What's up with that?
Usually when we have a pizza story in the news, it's some crazy topping that they've done, double broccoli or something like that. But in national news, and this went to the Osaka High Court, they've ruled against a man suing Pizza chain for delivering a pizza 52 minutes late.
Ooh, that's way too long. That's inexcusable.
The man, who lives in Kyoto, says it caused him mental anguish and sued Tokyo-based corporation Four Seeds, which owns the Pizza delivery chain, for 100,000 yen, about $640.
That should cover legal fees.
According to the man, last December he had ordered pizza for a Christmas party he was having with friends. Mm-hmm. He argued that he prepared other food items, assuming the pizza would be delivered on time, and that its late delivery spoiled the party. And the judge sliced his argument to pieces.
Oh, I like that.
Calling the idea that someone could suffer psychological damage from a late pizza delivery as inconceivable. And I agree with the judge.
Well, that's kind of a passive-aggressive move, isn't it, on the part of the pizza delivery company?
How is it passive-aggressive?
Well, I mean, just making the person wait in a very aggressive way. So,
because I think that was their plan, right? Hey, this person that ordered the pizza, make him wait.
Maybe when the person ordered the pizza, he was rude to the person on the phone at the pizza parlor.
Now you're projecting.
I'm projecting.
You're projecting.
But it could be, couldn't it? I mean, maybe there was something like that happened.
Okay, Kong, they've heard enough of you and I discussing it. What did people on the Japan Today comment board have to say?
Well, we had a very clever comedic response from somebody who goes by the name of Chico3. Chico3 said, I don't blame the judge for tossing out that guy's pizza claim. Apparently, that guy won't get a piece of the pie.
I think the joke is in the word tossing, but I agree with the comment.
Story is leaving me cold, so let's move on to something so hot that it's smoking.
Well, this is our final story, and it's a sports story. With the 2024 Paris Olympics about to start, one Japanese athlete will not be going.
Why is that?
Shoko Miyata, the 19-year-old captain of Japan's women's artistic gymnastics team, was expelled from the international tournament.
And we're asking why.
Well, she wasn't expelled by the Olympic Committee, let's put it that way. Miyata admitted to smoking and drinking in late June after she returned to Tokyo from the team's training base in Monaco. Just as a note to listeners from outside of Japan, smoking and drinking in Japan are prohibited for those under the age of 20.
Well, you'd have to give her credit for at least admitting it or confessing to it, right?
Sure. I would imagine that she takes everything with her duties with the team pretty seriously. Her absence will be a huge blow to the women's squad, aiming to claim its first Olympic team medal since, ironically enough, the 1964 Tokyo Olympic Games.
Well, let's get to some of the readers' comments and find out what they had to say.
Yeah, I would imagine that they felt Miyata was a little hard done by. So why don't you fill us in, Kong?
Buachel Dana, that's the commenter's name, said, all those years of training down the drain. She'll need a joint after that.
Well, I suppose if they're training in Canada or Amsterdam, then perhaps you can do that. But I wouldn't recommend it here.
Another comment comes in from Dagon, D-A-G-O-N. Dagon says the JOC needs to stop cracking down on athletes for minor expressions of youthful exuberance and go after their leagues of corrupt officials and cronies.
Well, I definitely agree with the last part of that comment. But, you know, as they say in Japan, rule mamote, follow the rules. I think it's kind of Miyata's fault that she spoke up, but I'm also glad that she spoke up because she just got it out of the way. I would think the JOC could have just overlooked it. You know, they're going to miss her for sure.
Yep. Of all the many comments we received, and we encourage you, by the way, to check out all of our comments, a reader who goes by the name of Wasabi got right to the point. Wasabi said she knew the rules and she decided not to respect them. My guess is most likely about her sponsor's image. Her sponsor's image. No sponsor, no money. I'm just thinking here that it might be prudent for her to reach out to Japan Tobacco or to Suntory and seek an endorsement contract from cigarettes or alcohol.
Yeah, I think that JT and Suntory are already big sponsors, but I do get this commenter's point. She knew the rules and she decided not to respect them. I get that. On the same token, the Olympic team really could have had a private meeting with her, blah, blah, blah. But as you said, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah. But instead of using a BB gun, they're using a bazooka.
Or a shot put or something, or a biathlon gun. That does put us out of time. And that was a quick recap of the news from Japan this week for this Friday, July 26, 2024.
Amen.
Thanks to the Japan Today editors for putting all these stories together for us. And thanks to all of you, our listeners, for joining.
Thank you.
In the meantime, if you have any ideas for things you'd like us to include in the podcast, you can drop us a line at podcast@japantoday.com or you could go to our podcast page where we put these stories up every Friday. And we had a few comments on there from last week's episode. Ricky Kabinski, who commented on the microaggression section, he or she said it was very telling. Thanks, fellas. Makes a lot of sense. Glad you are both awake. He's referring to a joke in the podcast. Glad you are both awake, and thanks for stating your game. Very much appreciated. All the besto. Thank you, Ricky Kaminsky. And we also had comments from a person who goes by the screen name Witchy and Wandora. So, yeah, go there and let us know what you think. I think, Colin, you had some examples, right?
For example, questions like, was our podcast long enough for you? Or was it too short? Or maybe too long?
Yeah, and maybe you have some suggestions in there. I would love to read your questions, comments about what we're doing on this podcast and how we can make it better.
Yeah, and were you offended by any of the comments that we offered in this podcast? Or did you agree with what we had to say?
Yeah, those are all very telling questions.
And did you hear any comments that made you actually think a bit more deeply, or some stories or comments that made you actually giggle?
Yeah, it's always good to giggle.
And was there enough information in this podcast?
Yes, we do want to make this podcast the best for the listeners out there and for news from Japan. So please let us know what you think.
We want to hear from you.
Absolutely. All right, you can find all the links to all the news stories we've just mentioned in the show notes below. And since the news from Japan never stops, you can, and you should, visit the Japan Today website anytime for all the latest stories. Of course, you can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, Instagram, your favorite, Facebook, and YouTube. From the Japan Today newsroom at G Plus Media in Tokyo, I'm Jeff Richards.
And I'm Kamasami Kong.
Join us again next week when we return with a quick recap of Japan's biggest
and most interesting and unusual
stories. Sayonara, folks.